unfortunately.
Good morning, afternoon, evening, everybody. This is Carrie Getz. Welcome to another edition of our podcast, Careers for Women, Trades, and Vets and Data Centers, and of course, everybody else. Today, we're lucky enough to have Mr. Garry Connolly here, who is a good friend I've known for, way too long, probably. That dates us all. But Garry, why don't you introduce yourself and tell everybody what you do?
Oh, thank you so much, Carrie. I age now based on whether you came into the industry as a floppy disk, a CD-ROM, or if you're a real oldie, you were in the punch card days. So we should age ourselves over media.
Punch card days for sure.
Well, there you go. So thank you so much. Thank you so much. We can carbon date us through our media. Thank you so much for having me on your show. It's great. It's fantastic. I'm here in Dublin, and I'm not as warm as you are in wonderful Florida. So, what do I do? What a great question that is. What I do actually now is effectively find problems within the community to see, can I actually use the term of co-opetition to help solve some of the challenges? Because like all industries, particularly young industries, it's a bit like music. Every generation thinks they've invented it. When in reality, there's only 12 notes. You play them in different order and maybe a different tempo. So what I'm trying to do now, and particularly with hosts in Ireland, is that we're trying to find the companies that are prepared to just put their egos on the shelf, put their own balance sheets on the shelf, come to a common level of understanding of challenges, like perception challenges, like talent challenges, like can we come together and maybe help the pollinators and use the platform that we've created in Hosts in Ireland to get those people to work together in a collaborative way. And what I'm certainly finding and keeping me interested is the whole sense of achievement when you find something of common purpose and you achieve it together. Wow, it's a buzz, a real buzz.
Yeah, it is. And you've hit on a few of the problems. So let's talk a little bit about Ireland. Obviously, is going to be a tad bit different than the U.S. A little bit smaller, a little different accent.
But 13% of my my bloodline calls themselves Irish Americans. So we're not actually human. We must be rabbits, because that's 40 million, is it, in America?
Something like that. Yeah. Well, I'm from Irish descent too, so there you go. Nobody's ever from British descent, though. Have you learned that?
Well, I have a philosophy on that. After the War of Independence, right? You're being rounded up, and the Brits have been kicked out, and the guy's rounding up, and he's going around, and he's saying, "Where are you from?" They're hardly going to say they're from Wrexham or London when they're meant to be going home on the boat. So I'd say there were a few fellas saying, "I'm from Ireland."
Could be.
You wouldn't know. So yes, you're right. We're digital infrastructure, data, Ireland. Without boring your listeners, when people ask me, how do you become a 1.8 gigawatt cluster, which is effectively of a 6.5 gigawatt grid, as a percentage is probably the biggest in the planet. I know there are other geographic locations that are bigger than that, but as a percentage of the overall, it's quite a challenge. And really, it started 50 years ago when the likes of IBM and DEC and Wang and Siemens Nixdorf and all these other guys started to globalize. And they were looking for a beachhead or somewhere to work from. So they put down their roots in the 60s and 70s. They were replaced by the likes of Oracle, Dell, Gateway 2000, the PC era. Those guys then obviously were replaced then by the Googles and the Amazons and the Microsofts and all these other guys. So I think really how you end up being a center of export excellence, which is what the data is to Ireland. And I think that's probably one of the things I'd like to get across, is that to Ireland, the real dividend is the value of the data being exported from Ireland into Europe. And of late, which is just a wonderful, wonderful thing for me to observe, is we're exporting the skills and services of the Irish companies that have built Intel and built Pfizer and built Amazon and Google all over Europe. And we joked, of course, about the emigration of the Irish over the last 100 years or so, but we genuinely used to just export people, and they never came back. Now what we're finding is with this earned respect and trust by the platform owners to work with them internationally, we're exporting people's expertise, and they're coming home. They're coming home, which is just extraordinary and a wonderful thing to see. And I guess that's the dividend, isn't it? Because a lot of people, and we may talk about it here, is what's the value of data centers to a geography? Well, actually, it's different in every geography you go to. Because if you don't have any other industry there, zero, and you've got a lot of renewable energy, then it's a great thing to use that renewable energy locally. If you then have proximity to a lot of people that need a lot of data quickly, then turn it off and see what happens to your smart city. In Ireland, we have always been seeing the value of the data, whether it's on a floppy disk, all jokes aside, Microsoft Word and SuperCalc and all these other wonderful things that we used to call a data center 40 years ago. And that's been the evolution. And the thing that really right now is giving me most pleasure is to see that the 22, the 23, the 24-year-old trainee working with an Irish company in Copenhagen, in Oslo, in Warsaw, but not moving away, coming back home then after 6 months, which is a totally different vibe. And they have their learned experience of travel, plus with a trade, plus with a few quid in their pocket, which is always good because they spend it local.
Yeah, I think that's one part of the industry that people don't realize. The travel, if you do want to travel and see the world, this is a great industry for that. You can certainly do that if you go to work for the right company. Got, I don't know, 4 million miles under my belt doing projects all over the planet. I wouldn't have been able to see any of those places without this industry. But I do also think as people travel, they see the value in their own countries. And I think it's important to have that bit of reflection as you travel.
And what you learn is that if you stay in one place, it becomes an echo chamber. When you travel, you may hear different accents and you may hear different words being used, but a lot of the global challenges are the same. Young people want more houses. Young people want, more say. It's the same challenges. And when you travel, when you spend some time, you get better early in your career perspective, context. And that's probably the thing that I'm on reflection as I get a bit older. Maybe I know there's great sayings on that youth is wasted on the young and all these other things. But I think ultimately what you get is you get context for circumstances. There's 6 or 7 different circumstances you find yourself in your life, and they just keep repeating themselves. I often think maybe that's what deja vu is. That deja vu feeling, and you say, this feels very familiar. It's probably because you experienced it, but the person was different, or the person was female, or was male, or the circumstances was different. So yeah, I think that's one of the things that's giving me most pleasure at the moment is seeing that we're not just exporting bits, but we're exporting people that can come back. And of course, aren't they the guys then that enthuse the next generation to say, guess what? I started off as a electrical technician or an electrical apprentice, and I happened to be out in Warsaw punching down. And guess what? I ended up then being on a server, checking out the air conditioning unit. And that's that learned experience of enthusiasm that a 22-year-old can give to a 17-year-old, that a 56-year-old can't give to a 17-year-old.
Right.
So
without the expression being followed by "Okay, boomer."
Yeah. You know what I mean? Is oh yeah. But so that's what we are finding, and that's why actually it's interesting that we always try when we have events have not necessarily always the CEO. Actually, get somebody who maybe a year ago didn't know what a digital infrastructure was. And you're talking to an audience of people who still don't know that the cloud is a data center.
Yeah.
And even though they work in the industry, they don't know that apps or software as a service or smart cities run on a data center. Um, and, and I guess we've done too good a job of marketing, have we?
Maybe so. I mean, people do, I think, take technology for granted. And I think in a lot of cases, they don't realize what it takes to make that technology just show up in their hand. It's kind of like the light switch. When you flip the light switch, the light's going to go on. If not, you discombobulate for a minute, then you figure out how you're going to sort that out. But it's the same thing. If somebody's data source is not available, and we've certainly seen that, when you have these high profile public cloud outages that then get written up everywhere and people have noticed, oh, I couldn't get to Gmail today and it's such a crazy crisis. I don't think they really understand what it takes to make that happen and how they can be a part of it. And we do have such a massive shortage of talent. So how are you guys approaching that over in Ireland? And we'll contrast that to what's happening over here.
I think words matter more than ever, and words need to start from the industry itself. I think it's fair to say that a lot of people in the industry in 2023 have an electrical, mechanical, building ilk of background and are more comfortable. It's like Linus in Charlie Brown with his scarf, they wrap all those terms of PUE and water efficiencies and stuff around them. The centers, what we're trying to do a lot of is the centers are the what. The data is the why. So by engaging and starting even at data center events or other events or going to colleges and talking, you talk about the sizzle, which is the data, what the data is doing. And you lean them into, you see the phone, that's only a percentage of the data. Your smart city, your smart car, your smart this, it's dumb without data. And suddenly you get them in that whole sort of data. Oh yeah. And then we have to keep the rain off that because the data doesn't work so well in the rain. And we put it into a center. And it's capturing the imagination of what the data can do. And then they want to be in that industry. Whereas if you start with, well, we've got electricity coming in and we build with concrete and we put up palisade fences to protect and we then get a PUE and we get that. There's certain people just aren't turned on by engineering. and they're really, and therefore, even when you sell on the data, there's two words in data center, isn't there? Data and center. And we start in these discussions. And I think, though, that's great. Let's call that our marketing for now. The biggest challenge you have is that talent right now, whatever age, because of the internet, because of search engines, because of all that, they know where opportunities are. They, I know this right to you and I, but we just didn't. We nearly trusted people to tell us that was a good job because we sort of didn't know any better in a way.
Yeah. Well, yeah. I mean, everybody our age went through some kind of an apprenticeship program in the data center industry because it didn't exist. And we invented it as we went. And then that model has removed, new and improved. It's been changed. It's a very cyclical industry. Stuff that went out 10 years ago is back again today with a vengeance, but in a different form. And it is very cyclical. But I think, you talk about the data and whether it's in a center or not. I think that because there's been such an emphasis on coding, a lot of people assume that you have to write code to work in this industry or that you have to be an engineer to work in this industry. And it couldn't be farther from the truth. And I'm really excited about some of these apprenticeship programs that are coming up because there's more than one pathway to learn. You take some kid that's had a horrible time in high school, they might rather gouge your eyes out with a spoon than go to college, or maybe they have to raise brothers and sisters because of family illness, or there's a million other reasons, but that doesn't mean that they don't deserve a good paying job. And maybe they just learn in a slightly different way. And I think all of those, if you really talk about diversity and you throw out, let me stick a label on you, the real diversity is through our life experiences and how we're all different. And I think when you bring people in that have that different mentality and they think of things in different ways, that's where the innovation comes in.
Yeah, I think you're spot on. You're spot on. Plus, we have 30 years of anecdotal evidence to your point that 30 years ago, again, I speak for Ireland, you could have been the first person in your family ever to go to university. It was a huge badge of honor. Your family would have a parade on a Sunday when you got your graduation. You were the first. Now people are saying, oh, I'm not that type of learner. I'm more of a learner of educate and then show me, educate and show me. So what we've seen locally is even accountants, legal, and all the other, a lot of the professional industries now have, I guess you would call it a hybrid between a traineeship and an apprenticeship. And therefore, if you have, and because every one of those types of trades have different levels of where you can go to, and now what we're finding is that it's no longer a, I won't say a bad word, but a second rate role to a career by saying you're an apprentice. Because back in the day, it was you were electrical apprentice, or you were a mechanical apprentice, or you were a jointer, or whatever. Now we're having these programs where it's right across the board, and it just actually is better because it now reflects your point, diversity of how people learn. We may all end up the same spot, and there are certain people who need those 4 years to go to college just to grow up. And there
Yeah.
are others that, yeah, just grow up and find yourself and do all. There are others that just are ginging to earn a few quid, and also ginging just to get out there. And of course, they do day release and block release and all this. And I think it's a much better blended opportunities that our CAO in Ireland, as you call it, the Central Applications Forms. It used to be all just for university and college and technical colleges. Now, as part of that application, so everybody is apprenticeships. So now there's no longer, only college people go to the CIO application. There's none of that. It's all one. What route do you want to take? It's early days, but again, what it needs is exemplars of success. And then once you have exemplars of success, you bring the 22-year-old back again and say, "This is how I started, and it suited me great." You know, and that's what you want, isn't it? You want to bring those that are only one step removed, maybe, to instill, because they understand a different language, bro.
Exactly. They speak a different language sometimes too. Of course, they would say the same for us. To be fair, that goes to.
You're spot on. You're spot on. I have to ask my 14-year-old often. I listen to some songs that she may like on the radio, and I say, "Okay, what did that person actually just say?"
Yeah.
but but I think that the first thing is to identify that it is. We all thought we invented that music note back in the day, and it's just their formation of it. So yeah, so I think the more I listen and talk to people in North Virginia and was recently in Hawaii and stuff like that, it's all the same challenges trying to personalize an industry that traditionally would have been more of an engineering bias. Um, and ultimately open it up and personalize it that you can be anything, come from anywhere. We need risk assessors. We need land acquisition people. We need people that can do spreadsheets for value of assets. I often think, and I use it as an example, and maybe I can ask you if you see the parallels. The industry has grown probably one of the quickest industry as an asset class. 15 years since the iPhone was invented really was the absolute um, acceleration. But there are other industries similar-ish that took longer, such as hotels. You know, back in the 60s, before transport of airplane transport, there was boutique hotels, right? They were like the telly houses of the data centers. And as
The
it grew,
Airbnbs of today.
yeah, exactly. But when you look at that, you had the small boutique hotels, then you had the big flags. Now you have the big flags, and they ended up now where you've OpCo, PropCo, ManCo, all the different, and that's where the data center industry will go to. That's how
Yeah.
it'll evolve.
Well, I mean, the data center industry itself has evolved. It used to be that companies just had a data center in their office building, And then they argued over whether that was a real data center or just a computer room.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
And then when the colos came about, it turned into this massive industry, whether that's cloud or people move into the cloud, move into somebody else's data center, or still build their own. Certainly all of those are in play. And with edge, now we're seeing devices that are basically data centers that pop up out on a light pole somewhere. So it's definitely evolved. And I think the amount of positions, I think we covered about 300 in the book, and that's not even remotely close to all of the positions between site selection all the way through to operations and applications. And it's a drop in the bucket. So,
You're
I
so
think
right.
if you talk about a country the size of Ireland with about 5 million people, where do you get all that diversity? I mean, clearly some of that has come from outside and you guys are now shipping talent out, but do you guys have formal college curriculum for that? How are you adjusting to those needs?
It's evolving. It started a lot of the courses had a module, a data center or digital infrastructure module, and now it's spinning out where we have straight up courses. Unfortunately, again, because those courses were degree courses or higher, more for engineer types. You didn't have, when I look at the data center, the Uptime Institute recently published a sort of where the jobs are needed. There's a delta, and the big delta is actually in the operational side, not necessarily on the design side, which is interesting. So the volume of people are going to be technician level. The volume, it seems, of the people are going to need a widespread of skills, IT, mech, and elect, a real broad spectrum, a generalist, because they'll be using AI tools and all the rest of it. So really what I think our biggest challenge will be is in the technician operational side. And I think that if I looked at that Uptime Institute thing, that's where the big delta of engineers is going to be needed to happen. The stuff on the edge is really interesting because I'm hearing now, and this is what happens when you need to do something and you don't have a choice, is that the use of technology for on-site stuff with headgears and AR and VR, where they have, like in Ireland, we have tier one help desks for technicians that are in Loughla or Warsaw or Milan. And those guys there are learning apprentices or trainees. That use of technology is something that I wouldn't have always given to engineers because they like spreadsheets and slide rules and do it this way. And that's the way we've always done it. And that's the way we'll always have to do it. This new gang coming through are saying, hey, you're going to pay me for wearing a headset that I'll do in my bedroom for free. I'm in. So, that again is talking back to the language, to the prospective employee or somebody into the industry in something that they love. And a lot of kids, right, wrong, we can have that different discussion, love gaming. They love that interactive augmented reality world. And as I say, some of the engineering companies in Ireland now are sending out not fully qualified dudes out to the regions to do stuff, talking back to a central centre in Dublin or Limerick, and they're wearing a headset. Jesus, they think they're living the dream.
Yeah.
But again, those examples. So we get videos of that, and we show here's an engineer working in Warsaw for a digital infrastructure, and he's wearing a headset, and he's 19, and you show that to a room full of 17-year-olds. I'm in.
Right.
So I guess words matter and how we present things matter as well. But there's no magic wand, is there? You know that. There's just no magic wand.
Yeah, I think a lot of it's just getting the word out that the industry exists. It's like when you go to a wall switch, we talked about this earlier, you flip the wall switch on, the light comes on. People don't realize what all goes behind the electrical distribution to make sure that it gets to said switch. I mean, the closest I think I've ever heard somebody come is my daughter when she was little. She asked me when you turn the switch off, if that light was just waiting in the wall all sad because it couldn't come out and shine. But
And you
other than
said,
that,
yeah. And you said, absolutely.
Absolutely, because technically it is.
And your husband said, absolutely not. Because you turn on the light too much, I got to pay for it. Money doesn't grow on trees. You leave that sad electron right where it wants to be.
So we're right back to that diversity topic again, and the different ways of thinking about things, right? So let's shift gears a little bit, because this one is really fun, and I think it's super important, and I love that you started this. And let's talk about DCs for Bs.
Oh, thank you so much for asking.
Tell everybody a little bit about it, because this is part of that. We talk about all these different careers in data centers. Sustainability is becoming a really, really big one. Renewable energy and things we can do with energy. And this dovetails into DC for Bs. And so, tell us about it.
So let's go back to the start for a second. So what was it? Pre-COVID. So 2019, my youngest daughter came in and she did a big David Attenborough on me. She said, Dad, do you know that we're the first generation to really know the enormity of the biodiversity problem, and possibly the last to make a huge difference? So once I got my head around my 9-year-old telling me this, I said, and she said, look, what are you doing? And I spoke to her a lot about sort of the different science-based targets that some of our partners have, and, buying an electric car and doing a few bits like that. And she said, no, what are you actually physically doing? Action. And it just got me thinking. It just got me thinking. And I said, you know what? Hosting our
nothing yet.
And it got me thinking. And I said, do you know what? The whole essence of Hosting Ireland, when we started, it was the power of the collective, success through collaboration, a co-opetition. So effectively, I just said to, the first thing I did was I went to the National Biodiversity Centre here in Ireland, which I think is the most important thing we ever did, because we let science be our North Star. Science be our North Star. We decided that, something, if we're going to make a difference, let's not have massive unintended negative consequences. And what better way to do that than actually go to people who have ologies in this stuff, who have targets in Ireland to have more biodiversity, etc. So we went to the National Biodiversity Data Centre, as it happens. That's what it's called. And of course, you know me, I was all about sort of, okay, here's what we're going to do. We're going to get all the cyclists in their Lycra, and we're going to put seeds in their pockets, and they're going to throw seeds as they go along the roads. And we're going to have these big things in the summer where we go hot air balloons and we throw seeds. And the lady just looked at me and says, I don't know what we're going to do, but we're not doing any of that. Right? And I loved it because she said, okay, here's what you should do. You should basically use us as your science, use your members. Remember, our members are not just operators. They're designers, they're builders, they're suppliers, and work with us in designing the world's first, as it turns out, data center ecosystem specific pollinator plan. And what does that mean? Well, use the science and the types of flowers and where they should be planted and why they should be planted there, all that science, to go from a window box in an engineer's office to 14 acres. That's the next phase of a campus, all the way through. And often, and I've learned this a lot through this, often it's just do nothing. Don't send it to grass. Don't cut the grass. Just let it be.
Let nature do its thing. It's a pretty good ecosystem.
Just leave it alone, because this is some of the times, what was it she taught me, that lady Una? She said, a weed is just a weed is a flower just in a place that a human doesn't think it should grow. So there's all this sort of engineering our minds, so that effectively we did the pollinator plan, but more importantly than anything, for the purpose of longevity, we got ambassadors from each of our partners. And the key thing that we found about the ambassadors from each company is, the way usually the marketing person puts their hand up, oh, I'll be our representative, or the CEO or this. No, we said, can we find someone in your company that, even if they weren't being paid, have a passion for biodiversity? And then you end up, which we found, with the second-year apprentice that is in accounts, or the security guard, so we got this whole confluence of different types of people that usually don't be seen really, but they have a passion for biodiversity and bees. And effectively then we worked with them because they had a passion. And what we found, which was great, was we found then that our partners had some capital. Our ambassadors were all connected with the community groups, which had no capital. And the bee and the biodiversity and a thing called the orchard, we have now started to roll out through orchards in the community. I think we've done 3,500 orchards, which is 20,000 actual fruit trees, under the guise of the rollout from the National Biodiversity people. And okay, we're helping the bees, we're raising awareness, but it's action, which is the key thing. And the final dividend, which is the one that I get the most pleasure out of, is it's getting all these big egos and all these big sea levels and all the rest with a shovel or some compost to actually find something of common interest, a project of common interest, start, middle, and end. And so what we're finding now is we can't keep up with the community demand. And at a time, and I guess this goes back to our point earlier, at a time when people think that everyone in data centers have horns, red horns out of the tops of their head, and they are the devil incarnate, and all these things. Here we have created orchards in the community for the right reason, because the science people in the biodiversity said, plant orchards. Why? Flowers on orchards are the first to come out in spring. All the little bees that have been asleep, not the ones in the hives, the little solitary bees, they're starving. So now we were able to plant them and plant these things called pit stops and all sorts of great stuff. And suddenly now we had all these community groups, which on another day will be objecting, asking, would you do that again next year? Will you send us out 15 more orchards? Now listen, it doesn't stop the extremists, but it just humanizes, personalizes people doing stuff with people via something that's in need of being helped. And that really is it. And we go down to Virginia a couple of months ago and we end up in KT Farms with, where the 7x24 people got wind of it. And we got 37 raised beds, 190 of the community in North Virginia, all out with shovels, with manure, and the sense of purpose at the end of it, when you look back and you see it, and you've got Cyrus One there and Digital Realty there and all the rest, and you go, oh, that felt good. So it's that sort of trying to create, it's such a young community, right? It as well, in age, in years, that anything we can find that doesn't revolve around alcohol and rooms with no oxygen has to be a good thing.
Right?
Has to be a good thing. Now, we might do the digging and stuff after we've been on alcohol and stuff, but it doesn't have to be the only reason. So, listen, that's DCs for Bees. It's lots of fun. It's ticking a few of the boxes that we all need to be ticking at the moment. Action-orientated change. And actually, we now have some of our bigger partners who are using the pollinator plan that we brought from Ireland to influence Frankfurt, London, Amsterdam, and Paris. Because we're all so busy. We just want a run book. Just give me that and I'll give it to the local planner. And we did that. And so, yeah, it's ticking a few boxes at the moment. It's certainly a lot of fun.
Well, and I think it's a good way for young people to get involved on the fringe. We talk a lot about on-ramps. International Data Center Day, that whole conversation is going to be on-ramps to the industry. And what a great way to start teaching people about sustainability and some of the ways that we can be smarter with our data than just something as simple as food supply. I think it's just brilliant, absolutely brilliant.
Yeah, it's amazing what you say there. Never in a million years did we think about the pollinators and the flowers into the whole food chain. And then we went to KT Farms or JK Farms. And that's what they do. They are a community farm. They grow fruit and vegetables and others for the community. And weaving that together, and we got the talk from the principals there, it actually then went up another level of feeling good. And I don't think you can knock anything we do that physically brings us out in the open with others and has a positive effect. I don't think there's anything wrong with any of it.
No, I think it's a great thing. I mean, I think the digital world separates people in a lot of ways as much as it brings people together. And I think, like you said, outdoors in the open for the common good, it's just a good thing. Well, my friend, we could probably talk for another 6 or 7 hours, but we're probably at what people are going to listen to in an episode. So if you
Okay.
wanted to leave anybody with any parting thoughts, what would you say?
Do you know, you said it earlier, we genuinely are only getting going with digital infrastructure in the world. I know that people are looking at the mergers and acquisitions and the amount of year on year. But when you consider, and this is the key thing, the why is the data, the what is the center. There are 50 billion things in the world today generating data. The projection by 2030 is 1 trillion. If you and I started counting to 1 trillion now, it takes us 33 years to get to 1 trillion.
Get out of here. Wow, that's crazy.
So well, you mentioned earlier, right? We are going from a phase where we had a computer and a phone. That's two devices. And even if everybody in the world had two devices, that's only 16 billion devices. Any form of semi-autonomous vehicle on the road has over 200 devices. So you aggregate that over millions and it gets to the trillions. So we need to find a way, and technology, the two mega trends in the world right now, you listen to Davos, you listen to all these, is decarbonization and digitalization. And we cannot do the first one without the second. Period.
Yeah, and there was actually a really great Cradle to Cradle is the book. It was over in the Netherlands, and it's a data center that recycles everything. And what they do is absolutely amazing. But they even take the carbon and feed that to the agriculture because plants love it, and they need that CO2. So I think we have to be careful when we talk about decarbonization, especially for the kids that are listening. Some CO2 is beneficial, and some organisms require it to function. So as you think about decarbonization, it's really responsible carbonization and responsible decarbonization, and not having carbon that's just wasted. But it can be sequestered. It could be put back in the ground where it came from. It can be fed to plants. All of these are brand new open areas for discovery that I think, 5-10 years from now, we're all going to sit back and go, holy cow, I had no idea that was possible. And it's going to be one of these young, innovative minds that comes up with something spectacular.
Spot on. And we leave it with the fact that really we've only seen this growth to where we are now, where we have society pretty much hooked on smartphones, right? It only was invented 15 years ago. Can you imagine where we'd be in 15 now that we've got the tools? So with that, we'd absolutely encourage anybody who has any form of an interest in being what genuinely is. We're in the fourth industrial age right now. Fourth. Data is the equivalent of the steam in the first one. It's the catalyst that drives the piston, that moves the coal, that moves the people. Data is that catalyst that makes everything that you see smart actually function smart. So you're in the middle of that. And then it's up to you to open your eyes, to look around, to talk to people who are in the data side. And you could end up being in coding if you so wish. Or you could just end up being whatever you so wish. But there's so many different layers of this that haven't been invented even yet.
Exactly.
So thank you so much for having me.
Yeah, for sure. All right, everybody. Well, thank you so much for listening. We look forward to you tuning in to another edition of this podcast episode. Garry's contact info or LinkedIn contact info will be in the description. And we'll talk to you all again soon. Thanks so very much. Thanks again, Garry.
Bye-bye.